Hello everyone, welcome back to the next episode of Mental Health Awakening. And today is going to be a really cool episode because today's topic is about storytelling, which is really cool because it's not every day we get to have a story, especially told to us. So it's going to be really cool, and Deborah's going to be sharing her story with me and Angela today. So it's really cool because I think we're all in different time zones around the world, so it's different time for each of us. So that's the crazy thing about it. But I'm going to let Angela do your introduction, and then we'll head over to Deborah for Deborah's introduction.
Hello, hello. I'm Angela T. Jackson. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Tennessee, the USA, partnering with the UK. I'm glad to be here. I'm your hostess with the mostest on mental health, and I'm super excited about our guest today, Debra Weller, storyteller.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this program today. As we know, mental health is such a critical part of how we navigate life. And I am a storyteller and an educator. Through my storytelling, I help people to go on a journey with me that takes them out of their present state and that they will identify with empathy and compassion toward the characters in a story. As an educator, I teach young children and I also teach adults. I use story as a path to create empathy and problem-solving skills. So that is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And I'm in Florida, USA.
How awesome. It is really awesome because Angela, of course, knows you better than me. But from what I've heard and what I've seen, you're doing great things. Always going to different places, and like you said before the recording that you broke a record about doing your storytelling. So I think that's really cool. So I guess maybe my first question to you, Deborah, is like what made you do storytelling in the first place, do you think?
Okay. That's a question I'm asked a lot because people don't always understand what a storyteller does. Now, I don't use books in my performances. I am an oral tradition storyteller. So I get to be all the characters. And for someone who is a bit of a ham, that is a good thing to do because you see, I was a naughty child and I was sent to my room a lot. And in my room, when I was being chastised from mom for something wonderful that I did, I'm sure, to set my mama off, I went into my room and I played with my dolls and I created stories with my dolls. I also drew characters on paper and gave them houses. And my Barbie dolls were in the closet on a shelf, and each one of them was going through a soap opera moment on all the different shelves of that. Well, that was the beginning. Then throughout my early teens, I was babysitting, so I started telling stories to children. In the back of algebra class in 9th grade, I did stories about pigs and drew pictures and had to be put out in the hall, even in 9th grade. So I had to find a socially acceptable way to do my storytelling. And I began storytelling over 43 years ago when my daughter was an infant. And I met another woman in New Jersey, Anne Lynn, and we formed the Annie Lynn Storytellers because we felt 43 years ago that families and children were getting too much media. 43 years ago, when it was basically the television, okay? We wanted to go out and to connect intimately with audiences by telling stories. So I worked in New Jersey for 12 years and then moved to California, Mission Viejo, California, where I began a nonprofit organization with several other storytellers called the South Coast Storytellers Guild. And we performed in that area. I performed for over 31 years, training teachers and docents But what I loved was my storytelling camps and clubs for children, because I was able to help children and adults find their confidence in speaking. And when they can learn how to speak in front of an audience through a playful way, like storytelling, it is a life skill that they have overcome an anxiety that overcomes over 80% of the people in the entire world, and that is glossophobia. And so by helping these children to feel confident on the stage, they were able to wow an audience. And I still am in contact with them now that they're all teenagers and young adults. And they're telling me that storytelling was the key to their success. So when we learn how to reach and engage an audience, we give ourselves a powerful structure. Now, it doesn't mean everybody who tells stories has to go on a stage like I do to perform. Our best storytelling is when we look eye to eye with a friend, share our stories in love, respect, and we are telling and sharing something about ourselves.
Debra, thank you so much for sharing all of your history, all of the wonderful things that you have done. And I'm pretty sure this won't be the first time that you hear this, but your voice is so soothing. It's so relaxing. It has put me in the mind of guided meditation.
You know,
So amazing.
I have read a recent study, and forgive me, I forgot the university that it came out of, but this recent study was on storytellers and their audience, actually showing that the heartbeat of the storyteller becomes in sync with the audience. And that happens with classical music and other presentations in the arts. But I thought, wow, how I could be on a stage and either have a small group or a large group and connect that way through the power of how the voice is used and how the story is communicated.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I like that you brought up music. I have been following you for about 3 years, and I have also heard you tell story through song, through music, with instruments. Tell us more about that.
Well, I am a storyteller who plays the guitar, and I love rhythm instruments, but not every storyteller does that. And you do not have to have that as a prerequisite for being a storyteller, but it's who I am. And so I write songs to go with my stories. And I also use the guitar as a little background music in my stories. So it is very soothing. I open with songs, and then I engage the audience, no matter what age they are, in folk songs, because we're losing those folk songs. And if we don't bring them to the next generation, they will not have those lovely stories and rhymes and rhythms. And I also use multicultural songs too, so that the audience is introduced to a variety of songs. But the songs help to carry the story. And with that, the audience, of course, is engaged. And an interesting thing has happened to me over the years of storytelling, especially in one recreation department that I did for 5 years. I went in, and the first year telling stories to the children. By the 5th year, the children were coming up to me and repeating phrases from the stories that they remembered. What does that tell us? The brain craves story. The brain likes to get information and put it into a story format to go into long-term memory. If we listen to data at a presentation, it's going to go, not be with us too long. So when we're presenting statistics or information in your presentations that you do, it's important to find a way to weave story so that all of that data has a meaning to the brain, so it can be remembered. Otherwise, in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I completely agree. And when you talk about music, I love that you played the guitar as well, because I think without music, there's not. I always say when we talk about music, it's everywhere. If it's with storytelling, if it's with just everyday life, really. So you may go around the town and you always hear music. It's going to be wherever you go. And for me personally, I love soundtracks of maybe different things. So I can listen to a soundtrack. So if I'm writing something, I can't concentrate if I don't listen to music. So I think that's really good that while you're doing your storytelling, that you'll do the music as well, because it makes maybe people concentrate even more to you because you're playing the music.
It's a multi-sensory experience. And we know from research that the brain and how we learn is using our five senses. And when information can be presented with a sensory experience, then the listener will, like you said, pay attention, be engaged, want more. Whoa, wait, that's pretty cool. And this is how we can be better at our teaching, in our presentations. When you're working with clients, it's not that you're going to go into song necessarily, but you might have soft, calming music in the background when you're working with your clients to invite them into a space where it's meditative, where it's inward. Now, for some people, if you know your clients well, you might need a jazzy song or a rock song to communicate with them, because that might be what helps them relax. And that might be what puts them in the mode where they're ready to share their stories with you, ready to open up about the things that they need.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. As a licensed mental health therapist, I often ask clients what their hobbies and talents are. And whether it's music, whether it's visual art, whether they're a writer, I often ask them to bring themselves to the session. I have clients who play instruments, and maybe at the very beginning, I'll let them share with me what they like to do, what they've written, what they've played this week, or maybe at the end, because I find that those hobbies, those talents, that's a beautiful foundation for coping skills to help with the relaxation, to help with grounding. And just as you mentioned, five senses, oh my goodness, I bring that up in session a lot, because whenever you have anxiety or depression or fear or trauma of any kind, you experience symptoms, and a lot of times people are wondering, how can I get this under control? How can I better manage? And the first thing I will say is, let's practice grounding techniques where you manually gain control and focus of what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, even what you smell, right? Sometimes memories can be triggered by a smell. So those five senses are so important. And even in terms of repetition with storytelling, how you mentioned sometimes the kids can remember things that you say, maybe things that you sing, maybe there's a certain line that you repeat to gain that attention. It's the same thing with coping skills or habits. I often say the more that you practice a certain habit, or we go over a certain tool or coping technique, it's the repetition that's going to get you to use it like it's second nature. So I want you to share a little bit more about us how storytelling really impacts mental health?
I will. What I have discovered in my practice over the past 43 years, and actually being a storyteller is therapeutic for me and lifts me up. When I get into a story, I can be the characters. And when I portray this in front of an audience, I want people to feel the power of the characters, the story. They will see in my face emotions that the character goes through. These are our human emotions that I hope they can connect with and say, oh, I was angry too, just like that character. I hope they'll see that in most stories, as we follow the plan of the story, we have characters, we have a problem, and then we have to solve a problem. In our daily lives, we are faced with problems, like you said, the anxiety where we need to find those grounding rules. Well, how did the character overcome their anger? How did the character deal with this? I know Bruno Bettelheim has a wonderful book, The Uses of Enchantment. And he wrote this book and dissected fables and folk tales and fairy tales and talked about the mental health component. When you look at the Grimm's fairy tales, those stories were written as cautionary stories. And they were written as well as the Native American stories, the African folk tales, all cultural folk tales, the Panchatantra tales. They were written with morals embedded in them. And they showed how a character overcame a difficult situation, usually good triumphing over evil. We all have that battle. We all have the evil in our lives that we can either succumb to because it's so brutal and it's so trauma-filled. I was an abused child. My mother, with 3 children, I got most of the verbal abuse. My brother got the physical abuse. My sister also got verbal abuse. So my mother's mental health, she was a very frustrated mother at times, but then again, she could break into beautiful Broadway tunes that we learned. In my childhood, my father was an alcoholic. So I had double trauma. However, we had our basic needs met. And we had very loving nearby family members that embraced us and neighbors. So when my mother was in a tirade, somehow we developed resiliency. I'd go into my room and play with my dolls. My sister was a reader. My brother would play with his Legos, or he'd go outside and burn the house down next door. So things happen. But each of us carried our own scars from this trauma. And my mother died at age 40 from breast cancer. So we had this next trauma of dealing with the death of a parent. So for many of us, you would say, oh my gosh, she's got alcoholic, abusive mother, death in the family of a parent at a young age. Well, that could all have put me into a cesspool. Had I not had grandparents and aunts nearby to watch over and get me out of that negative story and my own imagination, I would have wallowed and perhaps be caught up in drugs or other self-medication to endure. My sister wound up with a lot of anxieties. My brother went through a very hard time of drug abuse, but has since come out of it and beautifully. I went into the arts, and it was my saving grace. being able to be an artist and being able to act, a little bit of acting in high school, but then finding this storytelling as my pathway out of the spiral, the cesspool of life, where many children and adults cannot overcome that. The trauma is so deep and so hard. Without the help of a mental health counselor, they will wallow in it. And if there's a stigma in the family for getting help, or counselors at school don't realize that the child is suffering, or a good friend pick you up, what happens? We see those effects all the time in our communities of children or adults, young adults, who cannot get out of the bad place. They keep reliving that negative story, and they can't find a way out until they reach out for help. And we know some people have to get to that bottom place before they look for the help from alcoholism, drug abuse, and or that, you know, when children are in domestic violence situations and are being abused, they have no self-worth. And that's their reality. So when my mother was abusing us, we just thought that's what mothers do in my story. And back then, when I was a child in the 60s, mental health was a stigma. You didn't talk about it unless you were so severe that they committed you into a facility. But mental health, so God blessed me, honestly. And my sister was able to pull out of it and find a way to control her anxieties induced by the trauma and find her self-esteem. She became anorexic, which is eating disorder, the anxiety bringing on the eating disorder, and not having a way to connect and finding her self-worth. So we each came with our own scars. And I'm not saying I don't have them, but I basically have been able to shift mine through using storytelling. Entertaining and teaching was my other saving grace, to be with young children, and parenting classes. I've taught parenting classes for 30 years to help parents not to commit those same, I'll call them sins, whatever, the same trauma-inducing activities that my parents gave to me, and to help them to find the language of encouragement for their children. So in the storytelling, it's another pathway to do a kind of different way of therapy, just the same as using the music to lift up other people, to take them somewhere for a short time and see if they're able to use that story somehow in their life to give them power, like a good sermon, you know? Yeah. Did you find that one thing that the minister might have said, or when you were inspired in a class by a teacher, a quote, something you could hang on to when you had that trauma?
Yeah. I completely agree, and I think it's really inspirational there, Deborah, that like after all what happened when you was younger, like with your dad and your mum, to find that like a way out, like you said, with the storytelling, and like I think music has a big impact, because what I do, when I listen to a certain music I like, I picture I'm somewhere else. That maybe it could be where I've heard the music before. It could be maybe if it's a film, if it's a place that I like to go to. I think that especially if times are tough as well, I think music does really help you as and your mental health.
Mm-hmm. And I think like my son had a hard time getting through high school, and so he went into the school band, percussion instruments. That's what saved him and helped him to get through high school, to have a strong self-esteem. And he's still a musician this day. So like you said, music takes you somewhere else, right? It helps you to have a moment of protection, a moment to be in a sacred place. And when you're working with your clients, Angela, helping them to find that sacred place, honoring their talents by giving them an opportunity to share that real vulnerable place with you of their talents. And when we give that honor to someone, we lift them up. We give them a place to shine, you know, like this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Give them a chance to shine. When I encourage young children to find out who they are, and especially our teenagers, you know, middle school kids, when they start hitting puberty, it becomes so hard. And now with all social media in their faces, the perfection of, I don't look like that girl, so I can't be good enough, or that boy does this and I'm not great, and I don't dress like those people. So they start to get into that depressed mode that they're not good enough. And I think that's when a lot of our mental health issues come, when we start beating ourselves down and can't find what's good about ourselves. We only see the negative and dwell on that. And I feel story is one place. I train my kids to tell. I had great success with some students in my club, Asperger's. And they were not always accepted by their peers. The storytelling helped them to learn comprehension, which is usually an issue with our Asperger's, that they don't always have good, strong comprehension in their reading skills. They can read chapter books, they can read off the charts, but they don't always remember or understand the path that they read. So I teach them how to storyboard their stories. And that's where they draw simple little drawings to remember the sequence of the story. Well, these kids, when they would get up there, and of course I'd be right nearby in case they started getting jittery, and we'd talk about that and prepare. Nobody could go up on the stage unless they were ready, willing, and able. When these kids performed, and some of my very shy, quiet children who only wanted to look at their feet, when they heard the clap of the audience, or the audience laughing at their story, but not at them, because that's what they'd be getting from their peers, whoa, they stood taller. They were accepted now by their peers because they were on the stage doing something that the other kid, who maybe was the bully, would never do. And when we give people a time to recognize their gifts, whatever they may be, we give them the opportunity to grow, to recognize what is good within them.
Yeah.
Debra, I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate you sharing your personal story. Appreciate all that you do. You wear so many different hats, figuratively and literally. And I appreciate that. You know, the characters that you share. And as I said before, even in your voice, it truly does take you to a place, and it's just heart gripping and draws us in. So I know that the viewers and listeners are enjoying this episode. I definitely appreciate you again for sharing that level of vulnerability about your family, about your history, and the personal connection that you have had between storytelling and mental health, because a lot of times, even professionally, what we do and the way that we impact our communities and the world around us, it starts with our own personal pain points. It starts through trials that we have been through, and that is true resilience. You have shown, right? You're a living witness that you can overcome and be great at it.
Thank you. And I take that humbly, because when I teach my classes, I want people to know I'm getting ready to teach this summer older kids in foster care at a career academy. Now, those are children who have been on a trauma-filled pathway. These are the teenagers. They are going to be doing storytelling and public speaking class with me in a small group setting, so that they can be lifted up and prepared to tell their story at a job interview. So that they will learn their speaking skills to help them be more successful. I take this kind of teaching to my heart, to be able to use this in a way to instruct and help these students find out that, like my story, they have a story to tell, and they are learning resiliency and overcoming something very traumatic in their past, being separated from parents, drug use, whatever their families dealt with. So I consider it a privilege and an honor to be able to work with this population.
I think it's really good, because like with storytelling, I guess at the start it'll take a lot of confidence to speak out and tell a story, and it is much harder actually. So say even I do quite a lot of public speaking myself, and I noticed, because I did one a couple of weeks ago, and my first time doing it this year, and I've spoken with like 80 people on here, but everyone had the camera off, so like on a Zoom call, and I noticed the difference, how different it is, because it's almost like it's not as much pressure and not as much, I guess, scary on here online, but if you do it in person, like it's like everyone's staring at you, and they're just watching what you're gonna say, and they might be muttering with one another. And then you find it hard. What I find it hard to even, when I do it in person, what I would do is it's almost like I'm daydreaming. Well, not daydreaming. Well, I'm speaking, but like a blurry look, like I'm not really looking at anyone. Because it's very intense, isn't it?
It is intense when you're in front of a live audience versus a box on the screen, right? It's a whole different experience, and the anxiety and the sweaty armpits and your heart beating fast, and then you just get on your story path, give them a smile, and own the stage. That's what I tell everyone. Yeah. If you've practiced and you know what you're going to say, walk out there, give a big smile, take that deep breath, and shine on that stage, because what you have to say is of value for your audience.
Definitely. And the hard thing as well, say you ask a question maybe to your audience, and you get no answer, you get a silence. That's just the hardest thing, isn't it?
And you feel like, okay, that bombed, right? Oh, now what? Yes, so you have to have a workaround, and you can ask the question, but always have your workaround after that, and then getting them involved. The question is always a good hook. Yeah, it's a good hook, and it gets people like, oh, okay, they may not want to respond, but then when you start to lead them down that path with your information in a interesting way, it will be helpful. And you said about my voice, Angela. Yes, I highly recommend when people are speaking, Some people will tell me I talk like Mr. Rogers, but the cadence of your voice is very important to engage your listener. If you rush through like, hello, my name is Debra Weller, and I want to tell you about mental health, it's not going to be the same as giving, hello, my name is Debra Weller. My topic is going to be about mental health. There are pauses, there's emphasis, and that will make the audience go, oh, hey, it's not the radio. It's not, I'm going to actually listen to this person because she's drawing me in, you know, and your facial expression. And I talk with my hands. So when I'm doing, not everybody does, some people can beautifully speak without very little movement, but our face, our eyes, this is our connection with our audience. And when they see our passion to our topic, or how we care about them, not just our topic, we can do it. I always say, know who your audience is before you walk on that stage. Know who you're talking to. Do that research so that you will cater what you have to say to what they think you need. Like your clients, you prepare ahead of time, Angela. You've learned about them through the therapy sessions. You think about what questions you might ask them, how you're going to guide them through their catharsis, how you're going to help them to come to decisions, and how you're going to help them get on the path that might assist them through analyzing their own self and their problem and coming to terms with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Storytelling is definitely a beneficial practice in mental health because everybody has a story.
Yes, and that is such a qualifying thing because everybody might have a story, but they might not have anybody to listen to it. You know, and you can remember your painful experiences in school where maybe you felt like you were the nobody and nobody wanted to listen to you. Or maybe it was with your parents. They shut you out. They didn't want to give you time to speak. They were authoritarian, and maybe only their word was important, and they didn't, that's enough. I don't want you to say anything more. Go to your room, kind of thing. You know, cutting you off. When I tell the parents in parenting class and in my classroom, I made time to listen to those 30 little humans as best I could in the time that I had them, because I knew that I couldn't listen to everybody at once, but I would make time throughout the week to have one-on-one time with each child to hear their stories. And sometimes they told me amazing stories.
I'm sure.
What was happening at home?
I think it is really important. Like I always post when someone speaks to me, like how they actually speak to you, because I think it is really important how people speak to each other, like the tone, like are they actually wanted to help you, or are they actually wanted to be here, or do they just want to go home, or
Right.
And I think it's really important. And like you mentioned about like when we flap our hands, and I think that's really good. It had when you are speaking, it has a plus side and not so plus side. So I say the plus side because it makes you really movable. So it is quite fun, but at the same time, you may fear your audience is more concentrating on your hands flapping than maybe what you're saying.
That can happen. I'm glad you brought that up, because when I teach people in my classes on how to be a better speaker, storyteller, you know, we can't just randomly be flapping. You can make a point of emphasis. You can pose an idea. You can naturally just move your hands, but when you're moving away from your body and drawing the audience in, So I don't always practice those, but some of them come naturally after all these years of speaking and performing. But when we, start messing with our hair and pulling on our clothes, we're not giving the best message. So, or putting our hands in our pocket, it's the body language, of course, looking gruff and grumpy. We have to find a natural way that is inclusive to the people, not too repetitive, but it moves naturally with our body so that we are not being a distraction to the message. And, we've got these things and we're all addicted to our phones and devices, right? But when we can't have an eye-to-eye conversation with people, heart to heart, that in itself, I think, is some issues that we're facing in the mental health now. Because I see the families and people at restaurants, even couples, they're not looking into one another's eyes when they're out. They're checking their text messaging. They're not having conversations. Little children on devices. I saw it was a birthday party for a grandma. Everybody in the group were on devices instead of celebrating grandma. I wanted to go give her a hug. It was like, oh. I know that these are very important technology. I use it all the time. But I think in order to improve our mental health, we have to have sacred time in our family where phones are put in a basket, where dinner time conversations are eye to eye, heart to heart. When a friend is experiencing a problem, we put those things down and we look at them. And I think some of our mental health issues are related. There's pros and cons to our technology. We all need it. We all use it. It's a way of life now. It's how we learn. It's how we get through life. But we can't let it become the barrier to our emotions and our communication with one another. And I have a hard time in my classroom. My principal kept saying, well, don't you want more technology in your room? I said, no, these children are with me. It was kindergarten, 3.5 hours a day. They have plenty of technology at home. Let's not plug them in here. Let's have them actively engaged with one another to learn their social skills. It's a critical time to set those social skills in order. And we know with the pandemic that it was interrupting many of those social skills. And we are seeing, especially in America, in the last few months, with people randomly lashing out using violence toward others instead of communicating their needs. And it's so painful to watch the fear instead of saying, oh, hey, why are you on my doorstep? Do you need help? Instead of thinking the worst and using violence to hurt people or kill them. I'm really worried. I don't know if you are about what we're seeing, but it's indicative of something. I'm not only blaming it on the pandemic, but I think it accelerated things because of the isolation that people felt. Are you seeing any of that, and feeling that?
Yes, I agree with what you're saying. There's a lack of emotion regulation. There is that impulsivity. There's the lack of healthy boundaries, violations, injustices, harm to one another. And as you said, while it may have been induced by the pandemic, there are those features of that prior. So we definitely have our work cut out for us, educators, therapists, professionals in general across healthcare, advocates, Mason. We have our work cut out for us. Yeah, you've made some amazing points and that has spoken volumes already.
Mhm.
Oh goodness, I have enjoyed this episode, and I want to give you the opportunity to share how the viewers and listeners can find you,
Mhm.
what you offer as far as a service, and how
Mhm.
you can help anyone, I'll say anyone, craft and capture their own personal story.
My heart goes for the personal stories, the legacy stories, because it's when we start to analyze our life, the good, the bad, the ugly, you know, that we can, somebody's going to connect to that situation, whether it's a hilarious moment at your aunt's birthday party, whether it's the passing of a family member, those last moments with them, whether it's like I did, having to go through trauma in my early life to move forward. We can find that path with the help, like you said, of the mental health. But it is their story that I assist people. Now, sometimes my storytelling is purely for fun. And I perform live. I live in St. Augustine, Florida, and I am now back performing live. And I go to preschools and colleges, universities. I'm going to be in the Orlando Fringe very soon. I was just invited to perform there, and storytelling festivals all over the world and different platforms. But where you can find me most on Instagram, Deb at Deb Storyteller. And I'm also a Mrs. Santa Claus, Mrs. Sunshine Santa Claus. And I am using that character. I just set out how I want to use her, and I want to help her and show that we can solve problems through a mythical place of the North Pole. And I'm going to be giving more parenting tips, but using the elves as the little friends who need some help. So that is at Mrs. Sunshine Santa Claus on Instagram. I just gave birth to her. I've been performing this 15 years, but she now has her own. And I am on YouTube, Debra Weller, Storyteller 8084. And I can send these links to you so that when you post this, it can also be included. So I put up my stories on there, as well as Mrs. Sunshine Santa Claus is up there. But I also have had some videos up there that Angela has used as well about mental health and parenting. Now, you can find me on Facebook and on LinkedIn, Debra Weller Storyteller. I offer courses on my website. And it's hard to get that, but it's story-tellingcourses.com. And I often help people with virtual coaching experiences. So if someone has a presentation to do and they're freaking out about it, I will offer them time for a virtual session where I talk them into how to plan it, how to get ready to be on the screen, whether it's virtual or in person. I have a course on Thinkific site, and it's overcoming glossophobia. It's a short mini course. And with that mini course, I also offer a free hour of coaching to help someone walk them through. And it has PDF documents that help them to walk through their glossophobia. And like you said, with the anxiety, because it is an anxiety, I teach them those grounding tricks, how to overcome that. So that's where I'm appearing in the virtual world. But what I really love to do is work, like being on podcasts, talking with people, getting the word out. I'm this little piece of the universe. But like all of us, we have something important to help people with. And I feel if we use this medium for good, we can reach people in many ways, not just for entertainment, but for teaching. and giving advice and helping people in ways that is easily accessible for most people.
Yeah, it's so much information there, like for everyone who's watching this and seeing this today, yeah, there's so much Debra can offer, and there's all the links will be on the episode description, which which will be sent, because there's so many places that you can go and see Debra on so many different platforms, and the whole storytelling has been really good to hear today, because I don't think I've had an episode before about storytelling. We've had people telling stories, but not actually a storyteller telling them. So so it's been really fun to do this today, and yeah, I'm so glad Angela got you on today, because it's been so fun. We could talk for hours about it, could we? I think
We could become good friends. Now, where are you located, Mason? Are
I'm
you in the UK?
Yeah, I'm in UK. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll be heading over to Glasgow next week,
Oh, no,
in Scotland.
yeah, it's very cold in Scotland.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, yeah. I went a couple of years ago to Edinburgh, and I think to be honest, I went in October when it was going to be cold. So it was very fun. It's like, we speak about music. They have they got kilts there, which I wore one, and then they got the bagpipes, which are lovely to hear over there. Well, I hope you enjoy it in Glasgow.
Yes, my grandchildren live there, so I get to go and see them.
Yeah, it should be really fun to go there. Angela, do you have any final thoughts before we finish?
Well, I always like to wrap up by sharing some important numbers for mental health or for crisis care. Here in the US, our new hotline is just 3 numbers, 988. It used to be a full toll-free number, but by dialing 988, you can get the mental health crisis support that you need. As always, if it's a true emergency, you can call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. And in the UK, if you dial 999 or 112, that is the crisis line there. Do not suffer in silence. As it was mentioned in this episode, there has been a stigma on mental health as well as mental health care. There's been a lot of conversations to normalize talk about mental health, but now we have to recognize that it has to be more than just knowledge, it has to be action. There are people here to provide services to you, to listen to you. You do not have to suffer in silence. Remember 988 in the USA and 112 or 999 in the UK.
Yeah, I think those numbers are very important. And I said it last episode that we did, it's very good to include them, because not everyone may know them. Like, you should, but if you don't, they're just there.
Yeah.
But yeah, to anyone listening and watching, we hope you've enjoyed today. Whatever time it is for you, if it's 9 a.m. in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, we hope you've enjoyed it as much as us, and you can enjoy this episode as it is May by the time this has gone out. But from me, Angela, and Debra, we hope you have a nice rest of your day. And yeah, and keep talking about mental health, because the more we talk about it, the more people know about it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And we need to help everyone to get on track.
Definitely.